Tonight in movie reviews, we're talking Night of the Reaper. Stay tuned. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. I appreciate you tuning in for another brand new review. Tonight, we're going to be talking Night of the Reaper. Now, of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, no matter where you are tuning in to catch this review. We got a lot of great horror content up on the channel right now. A lot of really fun stuff coming up for y'all to check out that I'll talk about here at the end of the episode. But let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right on into things here. If you have not seen the trailer for Night of the Reaper before, college student Deena comes home for a visit and ends up getting dragged into babysitting for a night. Unfortunately for her, a notorious serial killer in her town ends up re-emerging the same night that Deena comes home. And there it is, folks. That is Night of the Reaper. Now, I'm super easy when it comes to putting out new horror films on streaming services like Shudder, where Night of the Reaper premiered this past weekend. You load me up with a good slasher, give me a fun mask, some good victims. That's all I need to really enjoy myself. I do not need you to be the next Scream. And it's very, very important here that we distinguish from the jump that Night of the Reaper is not going to hit that same notch you're probably looking for that you're going to get with a lot of other mass slashers out there. It does not follow any of those meta trends that we're typically looking for, to where the victim itself is going to be yelling off pop culture references. They're going to be smarter than the killer themselves. Phone calls that are happening back and forth, communication to where the victim has a chance to outsmart that killer. That is not what we're getting here in Night of the Reaper. And the previews and the way it's presented very much might lull you into the idea that that's the kind of movie that you're going to be watching. But instead, there's a little bit more going on underneath the hood here. Night of the Reaper is very, very much about dealing with the losses that are presented to us and how we actually turn that into something a little bit more productive with our lives. You know, we've seen in a number of other slasher films that have gone on to have lengthy franchises that PTSD is something that very much lingers in a lot of the victims who go through these kind of ordeals, and we get a chance to really look at and see how does that manifest in a second, third, or even a fourth kind of movie. You know, earlier this summer, we got the long-awaited I Know What You Did Last Summer follow-up, I Know What You Did Last Summer. And this film very much presented another way of looking at the effects of dealing with a mass killer directly involved with you killing your friends, with the characters of Julie James and Ray Bronson. Now, in my review for I Know What You Did Last Summer, I pointed out the fact that I always felt that Jennifer Love Hewitt's portrayal of Julie James in that franchise is one of the best portrayals we've had for showing how our horror heroines, our final girls, have to live with the carnage and the chaos of what happened in their lives, you know, months prior, a year prior, years prior, whatever the case is. And I thought that was a great way to approach it, because a lot of times in these franchises, we get a chance to take a look at our heroine or our final girl or whoever our focus is, and it's almost like they haven't been affected at all. They've really gone on with their lives, which we know is a part of therapy at a certain point, that yeah, at some point you're going to start putting some of those pieces back together and you're going to try to live yourself a brand new life. But I love the fact that some of these franchises have a good way of focusing on that lingering damage that still like traumatizes those who are involved in the incident in the first place. And that's exactly what Night of the Reaper looks to be doing here. This is a movie very much about grief and about trauma and the ways that we can respond to it. You know, we're following along the sheriff, played by Ryan Robbins, who you might recognize from Riverdale, of all places now, who lost his wife in a terrible, terrible tragedy sometime not too long before the events of this film. And we obviously can see here that the sheriff is not entirely on the level. He's looking for any and all information that can help connect him to getting any answers about this tragedy that has befallen him, and at the same time, he also still has to do his duties as the sheriff of his town to help track down this killer that's going around and taking out babysitters for whatever reason that is. This town has a string of murders happening in it to where babysitters are the one being targeted for it, and yet and still there's no leads, there's no suspects at all, and when Deena comes back into town, all it does is raise the tension here that these attacks are going to start up again. Now, Deena, for better or worse, is at first the typical kind of horror heroine that we've come to expect in a number of slasher films like this, to where they are very much not the bubbly, high energy, smile on the face all the time, okay with the world and everything that's going on, but instead, it's very, very clear that Deena is dealing with a loss and dealing with a little bit of ostracization from both friends and from family, and not feeling that she's in the right place. You know, there's similarities here to Clown in the Cornfield earlier this summer, with our lead girl there in that film being forced to move and up into her entire life, going into another small town, and then all these murders began. It's hard not to see some similarities there. Obviously, a film like Night of the Reaper likely would have been written before Clown in the Cornfield came out, so it's not like one is copying after the other. But again, Deena here is very much filling a trope that we've seen in a number of horror films, or specifically slasher films, here before. Now, the downside here for Night of the Reaper, the bigger downside, is the fact that if you do walk in with expectations based on the preview and the marketing of this to see something like a Scream, like an I Know What You Did Last Summer, like an Urban Legend, even like a Valentine, you're not in for that kind of journey here at all. We don't really deal with a lot of victims here in this film. This is a very intimate and personal story that's being presented, so it's not really about raising that body count up and getting our killer in this a high amount of victims to make them seem more and more menacing. The victims that they're picking, that alone does enough to really raise the stakes and show that this isn't something that this small town is easily just able to move on past. It's something that has rocked it to its absolute very core, and we get to see the few characters that we do focus in on here in Night of the Reaper, how they're ultimately trying to put their lives together and continue on living, even though they have faced so insurmountable tragedy over the course of the last few years. It's not really that bloody. It's not gory in the least bit here, and at least in my opinion, there's a little bit of blood in this here for sure. If anything, honestly, I think that a lot of the scares or a lot of the tension that's built into Night of the Reaper is really going to be saved for that third act, when we really get a full idea of what's going on. Because thankfully, while the film doesn't really top load the first 2 quarters of the film of setting up you trying to figure out who this killer is, what the motives are here behind it, why the victims are being chose, that's not really where the strength of the film lies at. It's really about that third act, when we finally get the reveal of who's behind this mask, who is the one that's behind all these killings, and getting not necessarily their reasoning for doing what they were doing, but how this involves everybody else that's been affected by these various killings here in this town. And I found myself, weirdly enough, not actually getting too upset about the fact that the first 2/3 of the film weren't really all that gripping, they weren't all that entertaining, but really enjoying the fact that this third act had me locked in. The drama of it, the way that we see these people handling like some of the worst things brought to life, and what they're ultimately going to do with newly discovered information, that's conundrum. That's something that I love to see in movies, to see how will the moral compass of characters who are chosen to abide by the up and upstanding and do everything right, what are they ultimately really going to do when they're put in the position to where they can get away literally with murder. And I don't want to say too much more because this movie literally just came out here, but what I will say though is that if you don't walk into it with the expectations of your typical pop culture meta slasher that we're going to get, then there is a lot to enjoy here in Night of the Reaper. I found myself feeling that it got very, very heartfelt in that third act, and honestly ended up leading to a bit of a darker ending, considering what we see on screen. At least I felt it was a much more darker ending than I'm sure that what a lot of other people are taking from it. I think to a lot of folks, they're gonna go watch this film and kind of take it as, well, this is a happy ending of sorts. I didn't feel that way walking out of it at all. If anything, and this is kind of a weird comparison, getting out of Night of the Reaper, I had feelings of the movie Cobweb from a few years ago. And if you haven't seen that one, tremendous fall horror viewing, obviously about a little kid who's living in a miserable, miserable life at home and thinks he's found an escape, only to find out that the escape that he's looking into might be just as worse as the situation that he's living with at his home right now. And the ending of that one, you know, kind of sent like shivers down my spine, the way that it doesn't truly wrap itself up and leaves it very open-ended for what could happen to this little kid that we're watching along. And even though that Night of the Reaper is not doing that same kind of thing, it was hard not to watch the ending of this and stick in my mind one very particular film that I feel invokes a lot of what this plot is going for in this particular case, and that was Scream 4. There was a lot of talk, and I've talked about it on this show before here, about how the original idea for Scream 4 and Scream 5 was that Jill, played by Emma Roberts, was going to get away with everything she was doing to Sydney and the, people in the town of Woodsboro and Gail and their friends, and that she was going to go off to college and still kind of like put the whole Ghostface thing behind her until a new Ghostface popped up, and it'd be Ghostface versus Ghostface in Scream 5. And without really like diving again much deeper into the plot here, it's hard not to feel, at least in the slight bit now, that Night of the Reaper seems to want to invoke that potential ending and continuance just a little bit here. And that's part of the charm of it, honestly, that I felt that that ending was not the usual one that we would expect to see, and yet and still it was just as haunting and just as effective as any other slasher franchise out there that might set up something a little bit more gruesome for the next installment. I don't think we're going to get a sequel to this. Let me be clear about that. I'm not saying that this is going to lead to Night of the Reaper 2. I'd be shocked if that's honestly what happens given the ending here of this film. But at the same time, I'm sure some of you who might know everything that went on with Scream 4 and the initial version of Scream 5, some of you might be able to see the same similarities that I'm seeing with this as well too. Something else to mention here, Keegan Connor Tracy, who was one of our leads of Final Destination 2, props up in a very prominent role here in Night of the Reaper as well too. Love seeing when she pops up in horror, so that's definitely a joy here for sure. Ultimately, what I will say is that if you're looking for something that gives off really great fall vibes, but maybe doesn't bring the scares, whether that's jump scares or just terror and dread in general that you might have watching more mainstream slashers like some of the ones I mentioned here before, then this is definitely going to be the film for you. But for those of y'all who fall on the side of enjoying films like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, all those kind of things, this is not going to bring the thrills that you're ultimately looking for here. Night of the Reaper is ultimately going to get a 2.5 stars out of 5 from me. I enjoyed it. And the 2.5 stars might not let you know that, but I did enjoy this film. But at the same time, I also have to acknowledge the fact that it's a different way of showing a slasher film and presenting the typical formula of what we expect. I'm curious what y'all think of this one. Please let me know in the comment section here. You can check this one out for free right now on Shudder, where it just had its debut this past weekend. Let me know what you thought about that. Am I off my marker with the Scream 4 comparison? I want to hear what y'all think about this one. And of course, make sure you are getting subscribed to my channel, and specifically to my link tree, as that's the best way to stay on top of all the content I'm dropping for you. You can do that by going to linktr.ee/tscarymovie. If you get subscribed, that's going to give you access to the YouTube page for the video versions of the show, to your favorite podcasting platforms for the audio-only versions of the show, my Letterboxd page for written reviews and movie rankings throughout the year, to my TikTok page for short horror content including movie news, premieres, and reviews, to my Twitch page for horror gaming including Phasmophobia, and to my Fangoria shop page where you can enjoy a 20% discount off anything in the Fangoria shop. Take advantage of that, y'all. Hit that subscribe button. Got a lot more fun stuff coming up for you, including reviews for the original Toxic Avenger, Street Trash, more of Alien Earth, and our last couple of episodes of Dexter Resurrection. Got a lot of stuff coming up for you that I do not want y'all to miss out on at all. And excuse me, got a lot of great stuff I do not want y'all to miss out on at all. And yes, we are going to get to the long walk. There's just so much happening right now, folks. I promise you, I will get to that. But that's going to do it for me here tonight. I appreciate y'all tuning in for another brand new review. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.